Everybody, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. It is Thursday, September 30th, 2021, and I am sitting here with historian and author, Professor Manu Ampim. Hotep, brother, how you doing today?
Hotel, brother Michael, good to be back in the saddle.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I wanted to bring you on. You have this 3-day Kushite-Nubian Heritage International Conference taking place October 1st through October 3rd. And this is a virtual conference, Friday, October 1st through Sunday, October 3rd, 2021. So tell us about this conference, Professor Manu Ampim, and let people know briefly also who you are as well.
Well, I'll be glad to do that. Well, I'm a, a primary researcher, historian. I've been doing work out in the field to really help us to understand classical African civilizations from a firsthand point of view and perspective. And I've been doing the work now for more than 30 years, more than 3 decades. So, we founded the Save Nubia Project as a part of my ongoing field work. And
Hmm.
this conference this weekend is an outgrowth of my work and the work of many other people who have been looking at classical African civilizations of ancient Kush and ancient Nubia, as well as modern advocates for the living cultures that link back to these ancient African civilizations in the Nile Valley. So our conference, the Kushite-Nubian Heritage International Conference, we have presenters and cultural advocates who are scholars and presenters from 7 different countries to really
Okay.
represent African traditional cultures and contributions to the world, as well as some of the modern issues as well. So it is a virtual conference, as we said. As you said, we have people from the U.S., from Canada, from Ethiopia, from Egypt, Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and also Japan that'll be
Wow.
presenting at the conference as well. And our goal is to link the past and present. So this conference is starting this Friday. We have a heck of a lineup to
Hmm.
really put people on the inside because never before has there been an international conference of this magnitude that deals with African civilizations from an inside perspective. Normally, we have outsiders talking about ancient Kush and ancient Nubia as opposed to from an inside perspective, cultural practitioners and scholars, archaeologists, historians, hydrologists, and cultural, um, you know, advocates. We have all of these people that are involved. So that first day, there we're dealing with ancient Kush in the Nile Valley. That's the oldest of the classical African civilizations. That's going to be Friday. We're going to start early morning with the first plenary session at 10 a.m. These are all Eastern times. This is
Okay.
a part of our website, which is Kushite-Nubian.org. So we have themes for
Friday, we're
each
going to.
day. We have themes for each day. So ancient Kush should be the first day. We have a number of presenters starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll have the first plenary session to put the conference in perspective. And this is a working conference, so we're raising important historical issues to direct and redirect and to review our own experience. So we'll deal with what I have termed as Kushology on that first day. The second day, Saturday, we're dealing more with Nubia, the great tradition and culture and civilization of Nubia and the problem with large dams. But not only Nubia, we have representatives from South Sudan as well, dealing with their traditional culture and experience. And also, even in southern Ethiopia, we have a Morsi representative as well. So we'll deal with a lot of the contemporary issues that face these traditional African cultures and civilizations in the Nile Valley that link back to the classical period. And then that last day, Sunday, we wrap up where all of the presenters, the scholarly presenters, the cultural advocates, we come together because as a working conference, we want to make sure that we don't just discuss the greatness of Africa in the past and contemporary challenges, but we also look at solutions as well. So these are the themes for each day, and we have the presenters lined up to be
Okay.
able to address particular topics this weekend. So um, we have that flyer there that really deals with a lot of the presenters. So we have professionals that are leading in their particular fields and making contributions. So we have topics on the significance of the mother principle and classical Sudanese culture, the origins of civilization in that area. We have archaeologists that are currently doing field research. We have a geneticist there who's looking at the DNA connection. We have a sister from South Sudan dealing with the significance of initiation, the initiation facial markings or gar among
Okay.
the Nuer. We have some brothers presenting on a whole new framework for developing a brand new script, the Nilarian script. Rather than using English and Arabic, it's why not use indigenous African symbols to discuss and present our own language. And we're dealing with the Nubian language as well, preserving the Nubian language. There's one brother there, Hefny. He's at the bottom right. He's classified officially as white as opposed to
I
black
know.
American.
I've talked about him. I've talked about him. And he immigrated to the US in 1978. I talked about him because I deal with how the term white and black are also legal statuses
Right.
created by the US government, and it's on the US Census. Okay, on the US Census form, when they have the racial classifications, a lot of people don't know that people immigrating to the US from North Africa and the Middle East are classified as white by the US government. And his case, brother, this is not conspiracy theory stuff. This is not, like this is not that. This is real. Okay, go ahead and talk about Dr. Mostafa Hefny for a minute, though. This is an interesting case.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. It's an ongoing case. He's been fighting it since 1985, so it's been
Hmm.
decades.
Hmm.
So it's a big issue. And I was on an interview yesterday, and the question came up from one of the callers: is he classified as white by the U.S. government or is it the Egyptian government? It's both, because
Hmm.
in Egypt, the official name of the country is the Arab Republic of Egypt, and
Hmm.
they officially have identified themselves as Caucasoid. That's the
Hmm.
official. And if people were paying attention to the King Tutankhamun DNA fiasco in 2010, they've been trying to present the Africoid ruler King Tut as so-called white for years and years. So that is the official position of the Egyptian government, and the U.S. government agrees with. So Hefny is one who's going to be talking about this directive, the special directive number 15, and his struggle to change his identity. So we have people dealing with cultural current issues, and even preserving the Nubian language is very important because neither the Egyptian nor the Sudanese governments recognize the Nubian language as an official language. So Nubians grow up, they learn Arabic. The goal is to Arabize them, and
Hmm.
the second language is English, not their own native mother and father tongue. They can't teach that, and they're not taught that unless they have their own private setting. So we're addressing these current issues, and also, South Sudan is important to us, but the Morsi in the Omo Valley, Olusolari Olibo, he's a filmmaker. His film is Shooting with Morsi, and he represents not only the Morsi but the Omo Valley, and
Hmm.
they're facing many of the same problems as a result of large dams that we see in the Nile Valley. So for us, in this Kushite-Nubian Heritage International Conference, we say preserving an African legacy because we're linking both the past and the present, the ancient and modern, and that's how we split the conference in that way, as we're addressing a number of critical issues from an inside perspective, and so people will get quite a lot from this organization of the conference because no one else is controlling this but us. And so that's why people have not seen this kind of conference before. So we put a lot of effort and work in to be able to get people to learn. So that in the chat there, the Kushite-Nubian.org, and you go directly to the 2021 virtual conference to get all of the specific details of when people are speaking, what the conference schedule is, and what the specific topics are, as well as their bios. And fortunately, we have some very positive and important brothers and sisters who've been doing the work, and also Professor Sekihiro from Japan. She was one of the most progressive presenters at the international conference in Paris back in 2018. She
Okay.
questioned the fundamental assumptions that were being presented by mainstream Egyptologists and mainstream Nubiologists. And she questioned their ideas, their framework, and their terminology. And this is why I particularly invited, as part of the collective that organized the conference, Professor Sekihiro, because she's very, very progressive, and she went to Sudan in 2007, and she admitted that she had negative views about the Sudanese, like most people, until she went and learned that her views were negative because she was fed the same nonsense that most people are fed, and she immediately flipped the script and changed her direction, and now has been an advocate for understanding the importance and the significance of Sudanese civilization. So she's helping to spread the word in the East. So we're great. It's great for us to partner up with so many scholars and cultural advocates who've been on the front line. And then we have our and by the way, I should mention that the sponsor of the conference is the Kushite-Nubian Collaborative, or
Okay.
KNP. So it's a collaborative effort of three groups. It's the Nubia Project for our brothers and sisters in Sudan. It's the Tasseti Foundation and
Mm-hmm.
the Save Nubia Project, which I founded in 2012. So it's these three groups, and we've come together. And our vice president is Baba Nuruddin Abdul Manan, and anybody's registering for the whole conference. He's on the top right. Baba Nuruddin, a Nubian, longtime Nubian activist. He's written a book about the Nubian language as a way to help preserve and promote the the living Nubian language, which has been attacked by both the Sudanese and the Egyptian government. So he's going to be talking about the importance of preserving Nubian language and overall Nubian culture, and how the large dams have been a destructive force in marginalizing and displacing tens of thousands of Nubian people. So that's kind of a general idea about what we're doing, and we wanted to make sure we dealt with people who have a track record of
Right.
being active in cultural and historical issues.
Okay. So just very quickly here, people, number one, the website is Cushite-Nubian.org, Cushite-Nubian.org, and you can register there. How much is registration? If you want to let people know about the registration costs.
Okay, so for the entire weekend, to participate in the entire conference is $75
Okay.
for the weekend. And if somebody is an elder, 65 or older, or a full time student, then it's $25 for the entire weekend. Or some people have indicated that they can only attend for 1 or 2 days. So
Hmm.
one day is 45, and for students and elders is 25. And then so that's the price range. And some people might want the whole package. So the entire package is $110, and that's the entire conference plus Baba Nuruddin's his book on the Nubian language, as well as my book on a
Okay.
history of African civilizations. So for the full conference, it's the 75 plus the books, $110 for those that want to take full advantage of our publications.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And let's see here. So people can visit the website, uh, Cushite-Nubian.org, for more information, and they can register there as well. Now, just very quickly here, let's see here. Just very quickly, I want to, we talked about Dr. Mostafa Hefny. I want people to read this article here about Dr. Mostafa Hefny. This is from BET.com. There are other articles. There's some articles written by Detroit news stations and things like that as well, because he immigrated to the U.S. in 1978 and he came to Detroit. An Egyptian man's fight to be black. Mostafa Hefny has been on a decades-long fight to stop being called white. Now, this particular article, so September 13th, 2012, talks about him coming to the U.S., immigrating from Egypt, 1978. He's Nubian. He's Black African. He's Nubian, and he
Right.
lives in Egypt. He's from Egypt, and he said the government. He talked about when he went through the immigration process, and they gave him his papers. He said the government interviewer said, "You are now white. You are now white." Okay. And he's been fighting since BET picked this story up from local CBS station here in Detroit. He's been fighting since then to be reclassified as black or African American, what have you. But this deals with the racial classifications coming from the U.S. government, and a lot of people don't know this. People coming from North Africa, whether it's Libya, Egypt, Algeria, the North African countries, they're classified as white and coming from the Middle East. There's no Arab classification on the U.S. Census form. Those people are classified as white as well. Okay, now explain to explain to people. So we hear so much about ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet. Explain to people the significance of Nubia and Kush. And we know Nubia is that word's of Greek origin. Okay. Just explain where Nubia falls into this. We don't hear as much about Kush or Nubia. Now, my listeners, we've had Sister Nubia Wardford on a number of times. So they get some of that information, but we don't hear so much about Nubia when we hear this history. Talk about that significance, please.
Yeah, and this is one of our areas of emphasis for the conference. And I'm going to one of the topics I'm addressing is the southern origins of ancient Kush.
Hmm.
So the the way in which people need to understand the classical African civilizations in the Nile Valley are that there's three significant ones. Number one, Kush came first, and
Hmm.
then Nubia, and then Kemet. So the civilization spread from south to north in the same direction as the Nile River. So Kush is the oldest of them, and it goes back into the early Stone Age. When I say Stone Age, I'm not talking about a Flintstone idea. We're talking about builders in stone who were building for eternity with gray whack, granite, limestone, alabaster, any kind of stone you can think of. So Kush was centered in current day Sudan. That's where the heartland of ancient Kush was actually located, in Sudan itself. However, it was an expansive Kushite empire, not only in Sudan, but South Sudan, uh, in Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Egypt, and across the Red Sea into Yemen and Saudi Arabia. This was the
Okay.
area of ancient Kush, but it was centered in Sudan and it has a southern origin. So, to know about the actual root and foundation of ancient Kush, the oldest of the classical African civilizations, we got to look at the areas of South Sudan, southern Ethiopia, northern Kenya, and in Uganda. So, this is where I've been concentrating now for the past 14 years in that region doing field work because you still have practices today that link back to ancient Kush. And even though the people don't have a memory of the practices millennia ago, they still maintain the practices and they understand why they're doing it today from their perspective. But it's very similar. They use have the same understanding that you see in the ancient artifacts, the ancient reliefs, the ancient text, ancient images. And so it's amazing to see the people still practicing in ways with the use of plants, the use of animals in the same way you see in antiquity. So Kush came first, and then Nubia is located in northern Sudan and southern Egypt. Nubia came after that. It was part of the old Kushite Empire. We know Nubia goes back more than 5,000 years, probably closer to 5,400 years, with the kingdom of Tasseti, which is on the edge of Egypt and Sudan in that area. So Nubia emerged in that area, and that's where current day Nubian speakers are in northern Sudan, southern Egypt, and then it's the Nubian civilization that influenced the civilization in Kemet further down north. So you have Kush, which is much more expansive and larger than Nubia in northern Sudan, southern Egypt, and then Kemet pretty much close to the current borders of Egypt today. And that's the flow of the civilization going back to antiquity. And so this is the field that is Kushology. Very few people know much about Kushology. They've never even conceived of such a field of study. And so this is why I started doing work in the area of Kushology back in 1992. And so I started to do specific field research on the origins of ancient Kush back in 2007. And that's been a particular pursuit. So this is why we're highlighting Kush on that first day. And we have presenters that were talking about the old Kushite civilization. And I'm specifically dealing with the southern origins that go to the southern lands that have practices and ideas even today that link back to ancient Kush.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So, uh, what now you talked about the mercy, okay, and the Mercy of Ethiopia, right? Talking
Correct.
about okay, and the Mercy, they are represented in the film Black Panther as well. You have 11 different African cultures represented in the film Black Panther. Um, you mentioned so the lower portion of um, ancient Kemet and the upper portion of I'm sorry, the lower portion of Egypt and the upper portion of the Sudan today is the what historically we call Nubia, right? That area, that geographic area, that's historically what we're calling Nubia.
Yeah, you mean the border area of southern Egypt and northern Sudan. Yes,
Right, right. Okay.
yes.
So talk about the um when the Berlin conference just screws a lot of things up, and because the geographical boundaries that we're largely dealing with today are the result of the Berlin conference of 1884, 1885, right? So talk about the relationship between ancient Kemet, the people of ancient Kemet, the different cultures of ancient Kemet. Talk about the relationship between that and Nubia. Okay, we're largely talking about cousins, or some people may say the same people, or what have you, because there's been such an effort to depict ancient Egyptians or Kemet, to the people of ancient Kemet, as white. But then when it comes to there was an attempt to um claim Nubia for white people as well, but not as much as Kemet. Okay, so talk about the relationship between those people.
Yeah, it's an important relationship because they all are in the same cultural complex. The
Hmm.
Nile Valley is one region, is one united region. So the Nile linked in the Nile Basin itself. There's 11 modern countries in the Nile Basin, from Egypt in the north to, Tanzania and countries like that in the south. But there's 11 countries, and they're all linked by this resource that is a highway of cultural exchange. So these are
Hmm.
not just some hard boundaries of Nubians and people in ancient Nubia and ancient Kemet, because there's mixing and mingling of cultural ideas, cultural practices, and even families. So it's not the hard distinction that outsiders try to make when you see, in fact, that they use similar pottery. For example, when you look at the pottery, yes, there's some distinctive aspects of pottery. One of the things that separates one group from another is their pottery. And in that whole region, you have, particularly in Egypt, Sudan, in that area, you have the black top pottery, which is very, very similar. The average person would not be able to tell any differences in the pottery. The average person would not be able to tell much difference in the statues or the reliefs. You can't even go just by dark skin, because you have black skin, dark skin variation in classical Kemet. You see it in Nubia, and you see it further south in Sudan. So so you got one united cultural complex, and you have regional variations. So yes, there are distinctive Nubian variations. There's distinctive Kushite variations. For example, you'll see a crown, for example, in the south, whereby the people of Kush will have two cobras or two uraei, whereas Kemet in the north is just one. Is that kind of subtle difference? Or but you see similarities, including the name Amen. But that name is very common throughout the entire region. So when
Right.
outsiders are trying to depict and misrepresent the history to say, oh, the people in Egypt were the real originators, and then they eventually went south and taught the black Africans. No such thing as the other way around. They all are black Africans, but
Right.
so what we have today is we have the spread from Kush to Nubia and eventually Kemet in the past, but today the Nubians are the ones that still maintain the family and genetic connection to the old Nubia and the old areas of Kush, whereas the people of ancient Kemet, that population has pretty much been displaced and moved further to the south. So now
Mhm.
you have an Arab population that's been there since the 7th century of the Common Era, and but they have nothing to do with the past or antiquity. So, in other words, what we have here is that south of current day Egypt, we have the Nubians that are there today, and they were there in antiquity as well. So there was a ancient border there, but that border was a political border and not a border with. It wasn't a cultural border. It wasn't a genetic border either. It was a border based on political outlines. Long before outsiders began to carve up Africa, you did have regions, districts, and you had borders between nations. And so Nubia would represent a political border, but not a racial border, not an
Right.
ethnic border, because it's hard to distinguish a lot of times. But there are some distinguishing characteristics. The Nubians were very much then, for many generations and many centuries, they were known as powerful and accurate archers. So the
Right.
Nubian bowmen, even the bowmen from further south in Kush, they have a long-standing tradition of being the great archers with great accuracy. So you see that more in Nubia, for example, and then further south in Kush than you would see in Kemet or Egypt. So there are some differences, but those differences are not as sharp as outsiders would like us to believe. And so this idea about black pharaohs emerging late in the 25th dynasty is nonsense. There's no such terminology needed because there's black pharaohs from the very beginning. And so anyway, that's why we need to understand it. But Nubia was well established before Kemet emerged on the historical record, and that's one of the things we need to know is that the mother of those two would be Nubia, and then Kemet coming after that.
Okay. So the and from my understanding on this, Kush was more of a geographical region as opposed to just one country. Now, it can vary, I think, also based upon the period of time you're talking about. But Nubia, it was more of a uh, country, so to speak, and Kush was more of a region. Okay, is that a good
Yeah,
way to
that's
understand it?
that's pretty accurate because there's no one area that we can say was Kush. It was a vast region. What
Hmm.
we can say is the heartland of ancient Kush. The heartland was where the kings ruled from and where they built pyramids and temples and tombs and elaborate structures. That heartland was in current day Sudan. But
Hmm.
you're correct. Kush itself was much larger, and this has been written about by scholars for some time, including Dr. Chancellor Williams, who did research in 26 nations and among 105 different language groups. He has a map in his book. He called it the Ethiopian Empire because that's the name that was changed by the Greeks. And when he mentions the Ethiopian Empire, he means the Kushite Empire and
Right.
its vast expanse. So you are correct. The Kush is a more general area with the
Mhm.
heartland centered in Sudan, but at the same time, there is Nubia emerges much later in a more centralized area. And
Okay.
then,
Now, oh,
oh, no, I was just going to say, and
go
then
ahead.
on what you're showing there, there's actually two. There's a link to the actual speakers and their bios as well.
Oh, okay.
In
All
that
right.
link.
Because I know you can click on each one each day,
Yeah,
and it gives
but
you
but
the
but
plenary.
if you go back, if you go back to the link you just clicked from,
Okay.
and then if you scroll down, if you just
Okay.
scroll down without clicking,
Uh-huh.
and you keep
Okay.
scrolling, you keep scrolling. Okay, now if you click on the picture, if you go back up and click on the on that picture there, the one with the collage, the one up above that, the collage of all of the presenters. If you click on that picture,
Okay.
then you'll get the bios and the particular speakers. So then you scroll, you'll see the sessions. Yeah, right there. So
Okay. All right. And then we go through, and then we can look at the times of the sessions, and we can look at the speakers, and they have a link to the bios. There's Professor Manu Ampim. Um, so you are at Contra Costa College, right, in California.
yeah, Contra Costa. Yes.
Contra Costa College. So let people know which classes do you teach there?
At Contra Costa, I teach a class, a history of African civilizations, and because I teach that class, That's why I wrote the book. It was for students initially on African civilizations, but I decided to make it available to the public in 2019. So I teach the African civilizations class. I teach California history and also U.S. history. So I'm going to see students in one class or another because history is a requirement for GE requirements. General education, you got to see me. So I'm
Right.
always teaching the U.S. history in California and everything else. I'm going to either see them now or later.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What is interesting. I teach some online classes, and I teach one dealing with from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement, uh, and Black Power, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Why, in your history class, you teach in U.S. history, and there's such an attack right now on being able to teach anything remotely close to accurate history. We may not say totally accurate, but anything remotely close to accurate history. There's an article from CNN from from yesterday, from the 29th. Tennessee parents say some books make students feel discomfort because they're white. They say a new law backs them up. So we see these attacks,
Mhm.
like in Tennessee, the governor of Tennessee, Governor Bill Lee, signed a law back in May banning critical race theory being taught in schools. But critical race theory is not taught in K through 12 schools, right? And we see this attack on teaching history, U.S. history, anything dealing with systemic racism, slavery, all of this, right? I'm just curious, what are like, do you deal with that? Do you encounter that opposition in your college, in your class, etc.? And just talk about the importance of everybody. This history, everybody, America is woefully ignorant of history. Okay, so just talk about the importance of everybody, regardless of race or ethnicity, understanding the accurate history of this country. And we'll connect this to ancient Kemet and Nubia also.
Well, this is critical. I was asked recently about students in my class, and in
Hmm.
the African civilizations class, like all of the other classes I teach, there's always a lot of diversity. So
Hmm.
if I have 40 students, I would say in that African civilizations class that I teach every semester at Contra Costa, there's more black students in that class, but there might be 40, 50, maybe 60%. However, in every class, there's white students,
Hmm.
there's Latino or Latinx students, and there's Asian students. Not in some classes, but all of the classes. As a matter of fact, for the conference, the very first student that signed up was one of the white students who's very progressive. She's taken all of my classes. She's gotten all of her family members and daughters to take all of my classes, and she was very excited to say, "Hey, I'm signed up. I'm in there." And she was so excited about the conference that she sent me a message last night saying, "I don't have the links to the conference." I said, "Hey, you know why? They're going to send it tonight. You're okay. The conference doesn't start until Friday." She started. She thought it started today, but
Okay.
I always have a diverse amount of students in the class, and here's why: because when you're telling it like it is and giving people insight from the inside, they know that. So they
Right.
know that this is not something exclusive. You'll never find me having an exclusive audience because it's open to everybody. And these are
Hmm.
not some spies or some double agents. No, no, no. These are people who want to know. They know that there's a lot of
Exactly.
nonsense and craziness out there, and they're looking
Hmm.
for a professional that can give them penetrating insight from the sources, from the firsthand primary sources, and they help to go out and teach and transform others in their family and their community. So I love it. The students in my class, they always are able to reach areas that I would never be able to reach directly because they represent such a diverse range of students. So if anybody set in on the class, they'll see that Professor Manu is the same way, whether I'm in the community, doing an interview, in the classroom, and or on campus, or in the field. I don't change. And yet people still come. You would think that people might be, wow, that's a little bit too much. We're not used to hearing this kind of talk. We're not used to hearing this kind of perspective. Yes, but guess what? They're being inspired. They're being energized by insight that they appreciate. They can see evidence for what it is, and they know that when I'm sharing information, it's not just talk because documentation beats conversation. And when I'm
Right.
sharing with them the insight, they appreciate it. So this is why in our normal classes like U.S. history, I might have I would not might I'll have less of a percentage of black students, but when it comes to the African civilizations class, they're never really over 60, maybe 70% on a rare semester. But other than that, diversity. This semester, I would say maybe the black students are 50 to 60%, and then the rest is absolutely diverse. And by the way, we made it so that anybody majoring in Africana studies at Contra Costa or who are majoring in history, they have to take the African civilizations class because if Western Civ is acquired, then
Right.
African Civ will be required as well.
Exactly.
So that's and then all of the other students who are not majors, they're taking it because they want to know about themselves, or they report that they want to know more about African history other than slavery. And I'm talking about the students who are not of African descent. So that's typically
Mhm.
what you get in the classroom. And there's been no semesters, not one, where what I'm saying has not been the case in terms of diversity with people who just want to know. So we should know, and I know you know that, Brother Michael, that it's not only us. We want to focus on us, make sure we have the insight and the information. But when we're telling it the way it needs to be told, we're
Right.
professional, we keep standards high, and we're doing primary research. There's a whole lot of people who want knowledge, who want insight, and they want a truthful perspective on the information and evidence. And that's what the students get in my classes.
Absolutely. That's extremely important. And what people have to understand is the way you treat a people is largely based upon what you've been taught about a people. What you know is largely based upon what you know about a people. What you know about a people is largely based upon what you've been taught about a people. And uh, the way the people's understanding of history influences the policies and laws they support and who they vote into office. Okay, so this definitely impacts us. This study, right here, this poll right here. Now, this article came out September 10th, 2021. This poll talks about how over 60% of Americans want children to learn legacy of slavery as well as racism. Okay, so you got a lot of people, regardless of race, who want to learn. They want their children to learn, but you got you have some a minority vocal group of a lot of times white people who are saying that they don't want their child to feel guilty because they're white. Okay, just very quickly here, 63% of Americans polled said they are in favor of their children learning about the lasting effects of racism and slavery in the U.S., while 30% of people polled said they are opposed to children's education on the topic. 8% of people polled were undecided, according to a USA Today Ipsos poll. So there's a lot of people who, regardless of race, there's a lot of white people who want their children to learn the accurate history, but you just have a vocal minority and heavily financed by conservative think tanks promoted by Fox News and conservative talk radio, things like this, that garner a lot of the headlines. Now, I want you to connect ancient Africa, ancient Nubia, ancient Kemet, things like this. Connect that to African Americans today. How does that ancient history connect and impact African Americans today? How do African Americans today benefit from learning that ancient history?
Excellent question. It's the most important, really, when we think about it, because we can always get stuck in the past and just talk about Africans being great in the old days, but that won't mean anything unless we really connect it to the present. So, excellent question. I always tell people that the problem we have right now is that we suffer from historical amnesia. We've
Mm-hmm.
forgotten who we are, and to be so-called second-class citizens, where our food, shelter, education, clothing, and healthcare and everything else is dependent on someone else. Either we've always been in this secondary subservient position, or the other alternative is that we had a way and we lost our way. And certainly that's what happened. We've lost our way. So we look at the past in order to help us recover in the present. So we have to not only recover from historical amnesia by remembering, but we have to look at the principles and practices that allowed Africans to be great in the old days, that allowed us to create societies and civilizations that has have withstood the test of time over thousands of years, and look at those principles and practices that help us work out problems today. And no intelligent, healthy group can divorce itself from its past and be able to solve problems in the present. So we have to look at the past in order to understand essentially who we are, recover from historical psychosis, and be able to look at those principles that Africans have used to work out their problems. We can't try to catch up with the decadence of Europe or the decadence of Euro America. So we have to look at our own traditions for solutions. We've done it to an extent. For example, look all over the country. We have programs in all these cities where there are rites of passage programs to help young girls become responsible mothers and wives and women, and then young boys to become responsible fathers and husbands and men in the community. Nobody did this from some scholarly assessment. No. And came up with this as just some creative thinking. No, this came directly from the African traditional culture where rites of passage from birth to death and beyond is a fundamental aspect of the society. So we're looking at the past in order to help us understand who we are, take those principles and practices so we can help create solutions today rather than trying to invent solutions when we already have a way that we have to embrace, honor, and learn from. And that's what's important. I mean, we got groups that live in complete harmony even now among themselves. They don't have the kind of problems that we have, but they're in more rural, isolated areas and not in urban areas in Africa. So that's why I spend time in the rural areas to spend time with elders, kings, chiefs, and the people that they call heroes in order to learn about their practices today to help inform us, not only about understanding the past, but inform us about how do you organize harmonious societies today and solve the problem. So there's always a link between the past and present that help guide us in the future. And we have to be an intelligent and enough of people in order to know this connection.
Absolutely. Well, people visit the website Kushite-Nubian.org, and they have the information. You scroll down, they have the information right there. We posted a link here on the thread of the broadcast. You can register for the course. And, I always say a people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. And two of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small, they teach about how is African history and culture that gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles. And this gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through. This impacts our self-esteem, our self-development, and self-worth. Let people know how they can contact you. Give people your website as well. You got a lot of information there. You got information about the fake Willie Lynch letter of 1712. We've talked about that some years ago, but we have to bring you back to talk about that. Willie Lynch never historically existed, people. Please throw that in the garbage can. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Garbage, you're right. So I can be reached at manuampim.com, where I have a lot of my articles. Also, advancingtheresearch.org. And from advancingtheresearch.org, you'll see a lot of the work, field work, as well as the educational tours and publications. So
Okay.
that so people can go there and obviously find me on social media as well. And so
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's important, whether it's Facebook or YouTube. And of course, we want people to come to the conference, the Kushite-Nubian Heritage International Conference. Go to Kushite-Nubian.org and register because the conference starts tomorrow and you don't want to miss it.
Absolutely. Well, look, brother, I know you got to run. So you take care, man, and we'll talk soon. We have to bring you back soon. Okay.
But thank you, Brother Michael. Good to be with you again, brother.
Okay. You too, brother. Hotep.
Hotep.
All right.
All right.
All right, everybody. That's Professor Manu Ampim. Be sure to follow us here on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. And be sure to listen to our radio show Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight, The African History Network show. We broadcast on 9-10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF here in Detroit. And we also broadcast on our social media platforms live as well. So we're on Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time, and Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well, the African History Network show. You can listen to audio podcasts of the shows or download the iHeartRadio app, search for the African History Network show, or click right here, listen to podcasts on our website. And I teach online classes as well. So we have class number 1 starting up Sunday, October 3rd, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, if you're registered for the Kushite-Nubian conference, that's fine. We do these classes live, and they're all archived. So after the Kushite-Nubian conference ends on Sunday, you can watch class number 1, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And we go through and deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. And we give you an overview of this history. It's a 10-week online course. Each class, we go through the history largely chronologically. And to give you, we deal with ancient Africa, ancient Kemet, Nubia, Ta-Nehisi, Ethiopia, Ghana, Songhai, Mali. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. And we go through history to see how all this leads to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We also deal with the African presence in the Americas going back tens of thousands of years. And, one of the books that we use in the class is from Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. This book right here. And his book deals with how he talks about the Khoisan and the presence of the Khoisan, who are the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They have the oldest DNA on the planet. He talks about the African presence of the Khoisan in the territory we call South Carolina, going back at least 51,700 years ago. So we go throughout this history and then show how the transatlantic slave trade takes place and starts right about 1441 with the Portuguese going into Mauritania. And we deal with Christopher Columbus as well. Columbus is essential to the spread of the transatlantic slave trade. Okay. So when we talk about the transatlantic slave trade, we can't start in 1619 in Virginia. We can't start in 1441 with the Portuguese. All right. We can't start in 1492 with Columbus on his first voyage going into Cuba and Hispaniola, things like this. We have to deal with thousands of years of history that leads up to this taking place. All right. So you can register for the class. The class is regularly $130, is on sale, $80. And we do the sessions live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. You can watch from around the world. And even next year, you'll still have access to the class as well. Okay. So that's the first class I teach. The second one is from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. And I do this one on Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This picks up largely where the first one, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, leaves off, because Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, I've been teaching that one since 2017, but there's so much information, and the way I really want to handle that period of time for 1865 to 1968, it just had to do this 10-week online course so we can focus in each class. We focus in on approximately a 10-year period of history and looking at from the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, and what leads to the Civil War taking place. Things like the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, Texas becoming a state in the Union, 1845, Mexican-American War, 1846, 1848, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which ends the Mexican-American War, and the U.S. gets the land that makes up Colorado, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the Compromise of 1850, which helps to organize that new territory that the U.S. just got from Mexico. And the Compromise of 1850 consists of 5 bills. One of those bills was the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which then intensified the abolitionist movement, made it more dangerous for runaway slaves who ran from the South into the North, which caused more of them to go into Canada. All right. So we deal with the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which left it up to the people moving into that new territory to determine whether or not they were going to have slavery, as opposed to slavery being dictated by the federal government. The Republican Party is founded in 1854 as a direct backlash to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. Then you have what's known as Bleeding Kansas. Bleeding Kansas is armed conflict in the Kansas Territory from about 1855 to 1859 between is armed conflict between pro-slavery groups and anti-slavery groups. Okay, and these are all things leading up to the Civil War taking place. So then we deal with talk some about the Civil War, and then we go into the Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1877, the Compromise of 1877, which ends Reconstruction, Jim Crow era, and how white supremacists, especially in the South, are passing laws and changing the state constitutions to fully take back control of state legislatures and politics in those states. The Texas State Constitution in 1876, then Florida in 1889 passes the first poll taxes. Mississippi State Constitution 1890, South Carolina State Constitution of 1895, Louisiana State Constitution 1898, Alabama State Constitution in 1901, and they're focused on passing laws to suppress the African American vote and lock us out of political power, because during Reconstruction, there are about 2,000 African Americans that got elected into public office. Okay, state legislature, you have 20 in the U.S. Congress. So there's a whole organized attempt to reimpose white supremacy, basically 100%, and take back control of these state legislatures. So then we take you through Jim Crow era, World War I, World War II, Great Migration, 1915 to 1970, take you through Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, okay, to understand what happened to us after slavery ended. What were the laws and policies put in place to put us in the predicament we're in right now, so we understand where we need to go from here, but also look at our successes as well, acquisition of land and building African-American townships and all different types of things like this, newspapers we have, businesses, etc. So that second class is from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. That meets on Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Do the class live. All the sessions are recorded. So as soon as you register, you can watch last week's class. That one's on sale for limited time, only $70, regularly $130. Okay, and that's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We just posted the link here also. Okay. And lastly, if you like this type of information, you want to support the African History Network, you can do so through Cash App and PayPal. $ the AHN Show through Cash App. $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal. PayPal.me/the AHN Show. PayPal.me/the AHN Show. And this is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN Show, SHOW. This lets us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting 6 days a week, etc. $ the AHN Show. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there also. These other ones are fake African History Network Cash App accounts that I did not set up. I'm trying to get them shut down. That's not me. All right. So, hey, it's a busy day. I still have to do a radio show at 11 p.m. But it's always good to talk to Professor Manu Ampim. He's brilliant. He's one of my teachers as well, one of my influences, and I've interviewed him a number of times in the past. We're going to have him back so we can talk about the fake Willie Lynch letter of 1712. I've done lectures on the fake Willie Lynch letter as well. This is deep, but it's just so much history and so much research to do. All right, speaking of research, I have to get back to doing research because I have to teach 2 classes this weekend and get ready for the show tonight. I already know what we're going to talk about for the show tonight, so you don't want to miss it. All right, right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace. Thanks for tuning in. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. Turn on live notifications so you know when we go live. Follow me on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Turn on live notifications as well so you know when we go live. And if you want to, you can sign up for our email newsletter also. Text the word Kemet, KEMET, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. We'll post this here. Text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter also. Okay. As we send that out usually once a day, and let you know when a radio show's on and different events coming up, etc., where I'm speaking, etc. Okay. Lastly, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at AHNshow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AHNshow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you want to advertise your African American owned business with the African History Network, okay, email us and we can promote your business, run your 30-second to 60-second commercial when we rebroadcast our shows also. Okay, if you don't have a commercial, we can create one for you. Email us at AHNshow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace.